Well, hey there, how you doing? Welcome back to my YouTube channel. Thanks for being here today. Hope you're staying safe and healthy wherever you are on the planet right now. You know, a couple of weeks ago, I published a video on YouTube. It was about the politicization of science and how it had really delayed our response to the coronavirus, and it's particularly critical of the Communist Chinese Party in their suppression of the doctors and scientists that talked about the possibility of a pandemic way back in December of 2019. Some of whom were arrested or threatened, and some of whom later died from the coronavirus. And now that same sort of situation has sort of crept into my own country here in the U.S., and I feel like I should be fair in my criticism, too, of the Trump administration. I mean, we now know that the Trump administration knew about this in January when the first infected person came over from Wuhan, China in late January. And they could have taken action and gotten the health organizations here in the United States ready and gotten testing systems up and running and all these things we've heard about. And they didn't. I feel like it's sort of the same sort of reason. They put political expediency ahead of the truth and protecting people. It's something that we really can't tolerate in any form, no matter what country it happens in. And we know now that President Trump called the CDC in February and yelled at them for scaring people about the coronavirus. He said they were being too negative about it and that they should be more upbeat and so forth. So the CDC, this preeminent health organization in the United States that could have been in charge of developing tests way back in February, didn't take the actions they should have because of political pressure. I know this is like 2020 hindsight looking back now, but if you look at it, it's the same sort of thing. We're in an election year. The Trump administration wants to keep things looking good, on all the different financial, economic fronts and so forth. And they did that by suppressing the warnings they were getting about the seriousness of this, what's now a pandemic. All you have to do is look at the statements from the Trump administration and from Trump himself, and you can see that he kept on trying to tell us that everything was great, everything was fine, only 20 people were infected, and a couple people had died, and then it was just, a few hundred people and so forth. And they totally missed the magnitude of a very, obviously critically developing situation with a virus with a high contagion rate and a high death rate, about 100 times higher perhaps than the ordinary flu. So anytime we see political motives take precedent over the search for scientific truth, we're going to end up with this sort of situation that we're in now, which is quite dire. And the point is, it's preventable. And if you've been following my channel, thanks very much for following it for a number of years now. The same topics we've talked about here have been, in a sense, victims of this same sort of narrow-minded, short-term political mindset to do the easy thing and avoid doing the right thing. I mean, just look at some of the topics we've talked about here. UFOs. I mean, again, we've talked about this a lot. We've had a lot of witnesses on the show here. We're going to have more in the future. We've had these sightings for at least 70 years. Good, solid sightings, lots of evidence, credible witnesses, trained observers, agencies in their memos and reports. We all know that this is a real phenomena. At least it's something, even if we can debate about exactly what it is and where it's coming from. It's something real. And yet the short-term political and economic interests have wanted to suppress the discussion of this topic, the exposure of the special access programs that are looking into these phenomena and so forth. And so we're still in the situation in 2020 where we're kind of like schizophrenic about it. I mean, on one hand, the Department of Defense comes out in 2017, says they have these photos from Navy pilots, releases the photos to Luis Elizondo, to the TTSA group. We've seen these videos and so forth. We don't know exactly what they are, but they're obviously not conventional technology. And yet here we are in 2020, and now the Pentagon is backpedaling on this and saying that the ATIP OSAP programs were there just to study other countries', advanced aircraft. On that sort of BS. We know that isn't true because former Lieutenant Tim McMillan has done a lot of research into this recently. Maybe you've seen his articles in Popular Mechanics that I've been tweeting about and others have been tweeting about, where he has at least 5 documents that show that the ATIP program and OSAP were involved in looking at extraordinary phenomena we call paranormal phenomena and UFOs. Luis Elizondo was the head of this program, and that the program is continuing right now. 5 solid documents. It's in the Popular Mechanics article, even if he can't show us those documents. So, again, it's the same sort of thing where we have scientific evidence of something happening. Someone's looking at it, and yet the political powers that be, for whatever narrow motivations they have, are suppressing the information so we don't have a good, honest public discussion of the topic, and who knows where that can lead. I don't think it leads to good places if we don't have this out in the open. That's just my feeling. Then we can look at something like the remote viewing program. We know that the remote viewing program, which officially started in the 1970s, had a lot of successes. It was so successful, as you can see in Russell Targ's great movie from last year, Third Eye Spies, which I highly recommend you see if you haven't, that some of the best psychics like Pat Price, who were working with SRI, were so good that the Central Intelligence Agency hired them away from the research they were doing just so they could do operational research every day. Every day. And if it didn't work, why would they be doing that? We have other people like Joe McMonagle that got Legion of Merit awards, one of the highest peacetime, awards that the military can give for his remote viewing efforts. So we know remote viewing worked, and yet in 1995 we were told that the program was canceled because it wasn't successful. There were no, as we were told by Robert Gates, CIA director at the time, there was no evidence it really ever did anything, and yet we know it did. It's the same sort of thing, folks, right? And so we have this kind of, again, schizophrenic attitude. On one hand, these agencies are using these trained psychics to do remote viewing for them over and over again, as they've said to me and other people. The same agencies came back to them, week after week to get more information. They wouldn't do that if it wasn't useful to them in some way. So there's another example wherein the programs were canceled because of political expediency. Also, because in 1995 there was a lot of budget cutting going on. People in Congress were anxious to show that they were cutting unnecessary government programs, and the remote viewing program was kind of thrown under the bus with all that budget cutting, even though it had produced very useful and valuable results. Another example, fluoride. This isn't something I've done a lot of videos about, but if you look at my Twitter channel, I'm often retweeting this information about how dangerous it is to add fluoride to our water supply. I mean, we know from the beginning of the research and interest in fluoride that it had a lot of dangers associated with it, and yet this information was suppressed. It was withheld from the public, and all we've heard for the past couple decades, starting from the 1940s, was propaganda about how it could help make your teeth stronger. And while there's a very, very minimal benefit from having fluoride, on your teeth, applied to your teeth, the risks have never been publicly discussed, and we never have this cost-benefit analysis. And there is a study from Mexico City from about a year or two ago that definitively shows that adding fluoride to water diminishes the IQ of unborn children. And they've shown this without a shadow of a doubt. There have been so many studies that show, just on that front alone, that fluoridated water can lower the IQ of children who are prenatal and in their infant years. And we still don't have a discussion about it. I can tell you from having looked at the evidence about fluoride that the studies that support it are so poorly done. They're not done according to modern standards that we rely on now to have any sort of confidence in the scientific study. They just don't have the statistical significance, you don't have the quality of the samples and so forth. It's basically kind of like state propaganda. And we know from books like this, The Fluoride Deception by Christopher Bryson, that this whole effort to make the public accept fluoride had to do with the need for fluoride during atomic weapons production following World War II during the Cold War. There was this feeling there wasn't going to be enough fluoride around. Fluoride is a very powerful solvent, one of the most reactive elements in the periodic table. You need it to work with metals to make them softer when you're making atomic weapons. And you can understand during that time period in the 50s, the establishment felt that we had to have these weapon systems to protect us from the Soviet Union. But here we are decades later, past the Cold War, and we're still subject to the same propaganda from the 1950s about how good it is for you, when at the same time the studies showed that it could be extremely dangerous. And so we're still in a situation where we're adding a toxic element, the most reactive in the periodic table, to our water supply, something that the companies that make it couldn't even dispose of because it's so toxic. So those are just some examples of how the political agendas at the time can suppress science, and it hurts us. It hurts us in ways that we can see physically, physiologically, from fluoride, or in terms of our advance of scientific knowledge into areas that could have tremendous benefits for our society in terms of energy and transportation and technology, non-polluting, carbon-friendly technologies, self-generating energy systems, and so forth. It's a whole nother topic, but we don't have the discussion about it because every time it comes up, it's accused of being a type of junk science. Just look at cold fusion. There's ample evidence that cold fusion is a real process, that it can work. Some people believe that there are inventions out there right now, like Andrea Rossi's ECAT, that could show that this could work. We'll see. But there's no doubt that it's a real scientific process if you look at all the people who've produced it and reproduced it. And yet the powers that be have always tried to present cold fusion as some sort of pseudoscience. I mean, nothing could be farther from the truth. But who are the people doing this who say it's pseudoscience? It's the people that support hot fusion, the kind of a multi-billion-dollar industry that has been attempting, and never successful so far, in creating a high-temperature fusion reaction with very complicated and expensive reactors that take decades to develop, and really complicated, expensive systems that so far haven't worked for more than about a trillionth of a second, honestly. And those are the people that are accusing their competitor, cold fusion, of being pseudoscience, junk science. But again, it's politically motivated because those universities and institutions that want to keep getting their funding for hot fusion are obviously going to present their competitor as being ineffective, fantasy, doesn't really work, so forth. I mean, we had this going way back with Tesla and Edison, when Edison tried to present AC power as being Tesla system as being dangerous, right? This has always been going on this way, and it will continue, but we should not stand for it. And that's the point here. We shouldn't stand for it in any form, whether it's coming from a communist country or our own government. We should not accept a type of science suppression when the development of these sort of ideas that have shown to have been around for decades could provide us with a lot of benefit, and they don't, because the powers that be don't want us to really hear about it, and so we're subject to their astroturfing propaganda instead of a real scientific debate. Okay, anyway, that's what I think about it. Curious of your comments, please put them in the box below. Thanks for watching. We'll see you next time. Take care for now, and bye.